Hello, everyone. This is Mathew Heggem, Chief Business Strategist for HireEffect, and I am here today with Alison Waldman. How are you today?
Hello. I'm great.
Good, good. Yeah, we just did one of her yoga classes down here at Shaw Yoga Studio in DC, and I feel amazing, actually.
Oh, good.
And interestingly enough, it just so happens to align with our topic today. It was a restorative yoga class, so you'll learn exactly what we mean by that as we go through the interview. But I want to first start off by introducing you a little bit. First of all, again, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. We're going to be talking with Alison really about sustainability, wellness, the human body, and how that connects to the work that we do as purpose-driven entrepreneurs. Now, as a wellness entrepreneur who promotes community vitality through the body in motion, Alison Waldman exists in this beautiful space. As a yoga teacher, wellness coach, and mindfulness guide in non-traditional spaces, she works with people across ages and experiences to help them find practices that fit into their lifestyles. Her work includes customized sessions for workplaces, collaborations with synagogues, and she is currently serving as a resident artist at the Georgetown University Hospital Arts and Humanities program, which sounds like a fascinating program. Yeah, where she leads stretch breaks, yoga classes, dance encounters for the staff and participants. She's also an RYT certified coach, consultant. What is RYT?
RYT is a registered yoga teacher.
Ah, there you go. Okay,
yeah.
So it's like official.
It's official. I went through there's a 200-hour training that's required for minimum for yoga teachers.
Wow.
So,
okay. Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
So you know what you're doing.
Yes, I do.
Good. Fabulous. All right. So that's just a little taste of who she is. But I'll have you, Alison, maybe say a few words about your own background, anything that you want to add to that.
Sure. Yeah. So I am a person in motion. But I also sit still sometimes. But my work is involved in getting people to move around in ways that feel really good for them, or to sit still when they've been moving around a little bit too much. My work in this field and this category came from my background, which is in dance. I grew up as a dancer all my life. I was in dance class before I can really remember anything, and my older sisters danced, and so it was always something in my life was just moving around and listening to music and just expressing ourselves through the body. And my training as a professional dancer and performer involved a lot of yoga, involved a lot of self-care and maintaining the demands of that profession. And that is what led me into yoga in particular, and from yoga into this wellness sphere. Yoga is a really wonderful thing that has been around forever and has become really trendy and popular here in the States, which is great. And there's a lot of tools that are hidden within this really broad practice of yoga. And so I've experienced yoga and taught yoga and taken lots of different kinds of yoga and also taken lots of different kinds of dance forms that have really helped me discover the power of that and what can be found inside of ourselves when we give ourselves the time and space to move around, and to do so in a place that is without any judgment or expectation about what it looks like, but rather what it feels like. So through these experiences, I found that is where my knowledge about the body and my experience in dancing and moving intersects with this larger field of wellness.
That's cool. And I just have to say on a personal note, I appreciate that. I too come from a dance background, so dancers in the house, right? And I think the reason why I appreciate that, and I digress slightly, is because I think as a business person, as an entrepreneur, we're sometimes not encouraged to physicalize, that there's like this sort of detachment from our mind and our body, and when we go to work, and that's
this gap here.
Exactly, boom. And sometimes that gap is really big for people. Right?
True.
It's like the tide, right? It's like choking you. But it's right.
Yeah.
But what's valuable about that is, it's like you get stuck in this like mindset of work, and you just sort of like start to distance yourself from your well-being. And so anyway, so it's just super awesome to have body educators in the business space, which is really what you've been doing to help those of us who don't have the toolkit or don't have the background to really understand how to unlock the potential that is there. Now, when I first reached out to Alison to participate in this interview process, I actually started talking to her about failure. And I recently wrote an article about failure for the HireEffect blog. And what was interesting about the conversation is she kind of flipped the switch on me, which I appreciated, and started talking about sustainability. And really, you know, when you think about failure, you kind of like think about those moments where you get into those stuck places, and it just, as you said, it sort of really sucks, right? But one of the things that you mentioned was this sort of practice of centering yourself around your why or your purpose. So I'm just sort of curious, what is your why? What is your purpose in the work that you do?
My purpose is in freeing people from, I think, these boxes that we put ourselves in, that culturally we put ourselves in, and that the demands of our jobs put us in. And so what I do, why I do, and how I do it is helping people remember that we have control over a lot that goes on inside of us. And that is, the control is something that we often lose when we get stressed or get anxious, or we think that we've lost control in this scenario. And even like in my work in the hospital, working with people who are working through illness, this understanding of feeling like our bodies or our minds have been claimed by something else, but there's things that we can reclaim, which I think is a word you used earlier. And these are tools and things that live inside of us that don't require equipment or like fancy clothing or even a lot of time. There are things that are already there. We just need, like I said, it's kind of a theme, like the space and permission and time to find them, and an understanding of how they can fit inside of what we're already doing. I think what happens a lot when people hear the word wellness or yoga, they're like, oh, God, like,
not another thing to do.
Yeah, I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't
have time to take care of my body.
Yeah, but even like, or like, I don't understand what that is, and we have a very narrow understanding of what that means. Or even meditation, people are like, oh God, like I can't meditate, but actually, or I don't have time, and it doesn't fit into what I'm doing already. So the why I do what I do and how I've designed the things that I offer in all these different settings is things that are really accessible. They're really low-hanging fruit, and they're things that don't take a lot of time. They're things that we can work into our days, and we're always all working on time management. Like that's a word that you know, we've been taught since we were little, working on homework, and so it's really just time management of working those things into what we do.
Exactly.
And it's just kind of readjusting how we're seeing our time.
Absolutely. So let's actually talk about that, because I think one of the central points of our conversations has been around time management. Yeah. And Alison brought up this idea of sacred time and establishing rituals. So can you just explain what sacred time means, and maybe even give an example of a ritual that you might set for yourself as an entrepreneur?
Sure. So for a lot of people who are in entrepreneurial spaces like myself, or we see our time as like an endless opportunity for doing things.
And doing nothing.
And doing nothing. There's like this, you know, it's a lot of like, it's a lot of like rushing and then screeching to a halt. Yeah. And so, and that's how we get super worn out. And so maintaining balance for me is through this ritual time, which is finding ways, especially when we're fully in control of our time, if we're freelancers or working on our own, and we don't have someone telling us, okay, the workday is over now, we're working at home and we're working in our home office, and like you could just go on and on and on. So that ritual time is time that is building the sacred time into your calendar. That is, it repeats, it happens once a week, once a day, whatever. For me, once a week works really well for me in some scenarios. But it's setting aside time that is time for you. It is time that I'm a calendar person. I physically block it off on my calendar and say, okay, these 2 hours on this day, once a week, are a time that I am not going to take any meetings. I'm not going to, and like actually don't take the meetings. That is the hard part.
I feel that time, like I'm like, oh, I have time.
Yeah, but you don't have time, right?
No,
like in that time, that is not what that time is for. And so the time that is set aside, and then when that time comes, knowing that time can be yours. If it works for you to have a specific activity that you do every time, maybe that's your time to go and do your laundry. Maybe it's a time to go and take a yoga class. Maybe it's a time for you to take a walk without your phone. Maybe it's a time for you to take a nap. Maybe it's a time to read this article that's been bookmarked on your browser forever. And so keeping the time that is open and waiting for you, so when things get overwhelming, you can look ahead at your week and be like, oh, well, I know that I can push through this time, but I know during this time I can have this restful time. And I call it sacred time and ritual time, not just free time, because it's really, the practice of it is really keeping it sacred. And being honest with yourself and keeping it sacred for yourself that this is my time. And because we have a lot of us entrepreneurs doing our own work, we have the say in our schedule in that time.
So, a lot of the challenges that we face as entrepreneurs is sometimes the messages that we receive in terms of what we should be doing and what we're supposed to be doing, right? And you get this sort of like constant, and you mentioned this in our last conversation, like this grind and hustle, work 80 hours. If you're not working 80 hours, you're not working hard enough.
Can't stop.
It's like, can't stop, don't stop.
Yeah.
Actually, yes, you probably should. But the thing is like that culture is not really, it's not healthy. It does not put you in a place where you're doing your best work. And when we talked about that, I think one of the things that was really interesting is you talked about letting go of the guilt that you're not working hard enough. And I think that's something that I've had to struggle with, and I think many entrepreneurs have had to struggle with it. And really what it boils down to is this idea is that guilt is going to maybe stop you from actually honoring the self-care that needs to happen, something that you talked about. So I'm sort of curious for just some advice from you to fellow entrepreneurs. So, as an entrepreneur who's on this journey of self-care, what just general wellness advice do you have for people who are struggling to maybe nurture themselves on this journey?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. And what I say a lot in my work is that wellness doesn't look the same for everyone, and wellness looks like what it looks like for you. For some people, if you're an active person who really knows that you feel better after you go to a fitness class, or you take a walk,
or a yoga class,
or go to a yoga class, or something, or an activity in the evening, is to make that a priority of your time, and to consider it part of your work. Part of your work is taking care of yourself, and you can't say you can't pour if your cup is empty, right? So it's taking that time to refill your cup when your cup has runneth over. So if there's a class that you really like that fills up your soul, and if you have the ability to hold that time and say, I'm always going to go to this 12 o'clock yoga class on this day, and I'm going to set it on my calendar. And the thing about the sacred time and this guilt, I just want to say, is that I had to. I've been freelancing for many years, and it took me a really long time to know this. And I think someone also actually said this to me, is that like I look at my calendar and someone says, "Hey, are you available for a meeting at a Thursday at 11?" And Thursday mornings are my me time. And I sit there for a moment and I'm like, technically I am free, but you say no, and the thing is that no one's gonna know.
That's true.
Like, never have I had someone say, like, are you sure you're not free during that time? Yeah. So all this to say is that, like, there are deadlines. Like, that is a real thing. And sometimes, like, it is, like, super duper important that you do that one thing, but make sure you save that time only for something that's really important. And if you do use that time for something, maybe, like, your soul, like, needs... will be calmed by getting this one thing done. Make sure that you take that time and you put it somewhere else. So to answer the second half of your question would also just be, the wellness time could also, if going up and leaving the house doesn't seem like a thing that's feasible for you, is to just turn away from your computer and take some deep breaths.
Like right now?
Yeah. And there's some great apps out there. We can put some links in the video, but there's ones called Headspace, there's one called Calm that have these really great guided meditations that are like 5 or 10 minutes. And they guide you through some visualization, so it's not just turning your brain off, but just turning away from your computer and saying like, this is the time I'm going to do it. Some other things I like to do is like when you're taking phone calls to take them standing. And this is something that gets into the multitasking, but it's kind of like if you train yourself, kind of like the Pavlov dog. Every time you hear something ring, it's like every time you hear a phone ring, like you stand up and you can just take yourself on a walking meeting. And what I tell a lot of my clients, especially with people who are working really hard, people who are in more like 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, 9 to 7
like that
schedules, that corporate grind is that. And there's more of this on my website, and I can share more about it, but just how to use these times of transition for wellness time. Times before and after meetings, when it's time where like you might start an email, like if you're waiting for someone to come to a meeting and they're not there yet, like what do? We open our phones, we swipe, we start an email that we're not going to finish. That's the time when you can just sit there and you can just take some deep breaths, you can take a stretch break, one tip that I like to give is if you're waiting for a meeting is to meditate on this person that you are meeting with. If you know them, you can think about, okay, what's my relationship with them? What is my role in the organization? What is their role in the organization? And what are our goals for this meeting?
Cool.
If you don't know that person, thinking that about yourself. But so it's things like that where you have the time that's already kind of lost anyway, and that's the good time. That also is when you're like, okay, like moving on to a new thing. Time to like recenter back in.
Yeah, that's a good tip. So before we wrap up, I just have to ask, it is Women's History Month officially, and we are celebrating women entrepreneurs at HireEffect. So out of curiosity, who in history has inspired you?
When you asked, he did give me a heads up, he would ask me this question.
I
was like, ugh.
Be fair.
So I have 2 answers.
Give me 2.
Okay, and one...
There are so many.
Yeah, there are so. One is actually in modern history I just finished reading Michelle Obama's book. And I was so moved by it. And when I read it, I, was very much alive in D.C., like less than a mile away from where all this was happening. I live close to the White House in the Northwest area. And when all of this was happening, when you're in it, you don't really realize when you're in the middle of a historical moment sometimes. And
it's happening all around us.
Well, right, I know, right? And, but then when you look back on it and you're like, wow, there were so many amazing things that she did in her time as First Lady, but also what she's done for young girls and women of color and just this opening up of like possibility. And she's taking her privilege and her platform to really do a lot of good. When she doesn't have to anymore. She could be like, I'm done and I can retire and I can live in my house in Colorado. And she is, so it's modern history, but I really enjoyed her book and I loved reading about her. And the other person I have to say also is my grandmother, which...
Grandma's in the house.
Mostly because my grandmother, her birthday was yesterday, and so she turned 91, and she's still like kicking it and crushing it. And she is my idol, and she's the most amazing woman that I know. And I always tell her I want to be like her when I grow up. And so I just feel blessed to have a grandmother who is still alive and well and able to like be herself and hang out with me. And so when you asked me that, I thought of that a lot. I thought of her mostly because I spoke with her just yesterday, and she's.
Happy birthday, Grandma.
Happy birthday.
Oh, that's fun. Groovy. So thank you for sharing that. So out of curiosity, we're going to wrap up, but out of curiosity, like how do people find you? Where do they go? How can they kind of plug into what you're up to?
Sure. So I'm on the Instagram. My handle is Alison in Motion. My first name is ALISON. AlisonInMotion.dc. I post a lot on Instagram about my schedule, my yoga schedule, the workshops I'm teaching around the city, but also I do like some stretch breaks and things like that, some little midday reminders to kind of get up and move. I also have a website, AlisonWaldman.com, and I have a newsletter there. I send out some stretch break tips and some other fun things that happen, so you can subscribe there. I'm also on Facebook at Alison Waldman. And I teach around the city, so if you go to any of those places, you will find find my name on the schedule. And if you're ever at Georgetown University Hospital for any reason, ask about the Arts and Humanities program. And if I'm there, I'd love to show you around and tell you more about what we do there at Georgetown.
And one last plug on that front. I mean, I know you in different capacities now at this point, but you're nailing Instagram. Like the Instagram stories. Like I'm a marketing person, and I look at examples and I see people and like, okay, who's doing it well, who's not. If you don't know what you're doing on Instagram, just like go to her Instagram and just check it out because it's a pretty good starting point.
Thank you.
Like you do a really good job. You take time. I don't know how much time you take time. It's intentional. It's clear. It's informative. I show up because I feel like I'm getting to know you. It worked. Success. I'm proof. Boom. Here. Anyways, all right. So have a fabulous afternoon, day, evening, whatever time of the day or night it is that you're experiencing this video. Thank you again for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for inviting me to share this with you.
All right. Ciao.
Bye, everyone.